Hello everyone. So I'm gonna just take you way back to the beginning when I was, say, 2 to 3 years old, and I just moved to my old hometown of Buckfordsley. My first memory of that place was I didn't want to be there. That was my first negative memory as a child. Very young to be having such a memory, and it's always stayed with me, and I don't know why. Maybe it's for a reason to show me when my ego first attached to this body, this Pablo Kelly. Some of you may understand and others may reject what I'm saying, but the ego kicks in when we're very small, and sometimes it's just little things that trigger the egoic response. So, arrived in Buckfordsley. My next memory was throwing a skateboard through the front window of that house. I don't know why that stuck with me. It was my first proper tantrum at my mum, and so we were brought up just by my mother. My father was never around. He decided he could not handle the burden of fathership, so he was distant. He smoked a lot of cannabis. He stayed away. We never really saw him, didn't really know who he was. We used to go and meet him in Totnes. Occasionally he'd go to the laundrette and we would hang around with him, and he would give us chocolate raisins as treats. So kind of fond memories as a child. But yeah, so that kind of tees up where I came from. I was an introvert. Now that I know what that means, I realise that's what I was when I was very young. Someone who was very inward. I thought a lot. I didn't speak a lot. At an early age, I got in with the wrong kind of crowd. There's a person called Jimmy O'Brien. He came from a gypsy background, so his family were gypsies. They were kind of rough. They were always haggling and cheating people out of stuff. So that was pretty strange time in my life. And the thing is, I kind of attracted that to me. We were good friends. He wasn't mean to me until he grew up a little bit. He ended up becoming one of my worst bullies, going to treat me like crap, but I still persevered and hung around with him because I had an egoic attachment to him. And ended up getting in with the crowd of Buckfordsley, which was generally not very nice. They weren't very nice people. They were very, because I was brought up with teachings of Buddhism and such as Sai Baba. You may have heard of him, you may not have. He's passed on now, but he was a guru, someone who had wisdom to share. People worshipped him in India from when he was very young. He's a reincarnation of sorts. We used to sing bhajans and things when I was very little. We were given homeopathy. We were vegetarian, which at the time, the early 90s, lots of people were going vegetarian and vegan, and started kicking off. And yeah, so I was very different. We didn't have a lot of money because I was a single mum, and we struggled a lot, but I didn't realise that was a thing. We just had I had my hand-me-down clothes from my uncle Chi, and that was that. And I thought it was normal, and we just did what we did. We ate poor food, cheap food, but we ate healthily, as I assumed from an early age. So I had two sisters, and a third one arrived when my mum dated another guy. So I've got three sisters, yeah. And yeah, so I got into, I was quite sporty, quite energetic. Had a lot of accidents when I was younger. Fell on my head a few times off brick walls and stuff. And I got into smoking at the age of 12. because one of my bullies, he shoved a cigarette in my mouth and forced me to smoke it, and I got addicted. And my mum called me one day because I used to steal her money and go down to the shop and ask a 16-year-old to buy cigarettes. Back in the days when 16 years old was okay to buy cigarettes. So yeah, I'm not painting a pretty picture, but it's my picture, it's my story, it's where I came from, it's created who I am now. So I had lots of grief, lots of trauma, all from an early age. And I dealt with it in the way most people do, which is to rebel against their parents, my mother, to do silly things, make poor choices, hang around with people that really weren't good for you. And so I actually quit smoking at the age of 12, because my mum said you can't go out. She called me, dragged me home by the ear, and said you're basically not allowed to go out for as long as it takes till you quit. And I was so addicted, like I could not sleep. I was very stressed out, and she used to play bhajan music, spiritual music to me, so I could get to sleep. So I ended up learning mantras off by heart by just listening to the sounds. One particular one was the Gayatri mantra, and I eventually kicked the habit. I kind of got over it cold turkey as a 12-year-old. And thinking back, it's so ridiculous that in that day and age, there was like, I was born in 88, so when I was 12, that was 98. Year 2000, big turn of the century, the new millennia, and I think it didn't take long for me to get coerced back into it and to want to do it again, because I started I went to secondary school from primary school, and I ended up getting a taste for cannabis, so I started going into cannabis hard, and rock music, Nirvana, hip hop, drum and bass, and I kind of thought I became a hipster for that time. Pretty cool, hanging around with the cool kids, listening to the cool music, pretending to be something I wasn't, putting on a persona, like we all do, playing the act of Pablo, and hiding all my trauma from my past, or my grief, or my pain, with the use of drugs. I was kind of withholding myself. Didn't really get into education, didn't really learn a lot. Although all my teachers used to say you're a good student, but I didn't believe it. And so I'd rebel, and I'd do silly things, and I'd try and get in trouble. I'd be a class clown. That was my kind of genre. That's who I was. That's who I played. The act of an idiot. Hanging around with the wrong people, the wrong crowd. I mean, I'm not going to call them the wrong crowd. What I will say is they give me an experience of myself. And I love these people for it now. But I know it was considered wrong. And my mum didn't like it, but she could not stop me. You can't force your children to do anything they don't want to, ideally. You want them to learn from your mistakes, and that's quite hard to control. And basically, that kind of persisted for I don't know how many years. I used to skive off from school a lot. I used to feign having a headache. I used to just mitch off from school. Just go, oh, let's not go today, let's go get high instead. Wander around town, act the lad. And even till I was 16, 17, 18. At the age of 17 I left home. I was scamming my mum out of money for drugs and playing all these things like, oh, my drug dealer is gonna hurt me if I don't pay him. I'm being honest about this because it paints a picture of who I was and what I did and why I did it. I did it for no reason. There was no reason other than people influenced me to do it. They were like, oh yeah, perhaps you've done it before, go on, nick some money. buy some weed, do this, and I wanted to fit in so badly. I was so desperate to fit in because I was so different to everybody else. And I created more problems than good. And I betrayed the trust of my mother, the love of my mother, and I betrayed my family, and I wasn't a bully, I wasn't nasty, I just made these mistakes to fit in. And, I'm not going to regret what I did because I did it. There's no point in denying that it happened. I did it, and I wanted to do it, and I was willing, and I did it. And I held on to the resentment for myself, the guilt, for a long time. I blamed my mum for the mistakes I made. But at the age of 17 it all came to a head, and my mum and myself had an argument because I scammed her out of money. Well, I could have gone to Barcelona on a photography trip, and I chose to lie and get that money and spend it on weed and have a good time. And it turned out to be the worst time of my life because she said, I don't want to live here anymore. And she said, I'll leave then. And I said, I fucking will. And I left. So I ended up staying in a caravan with my friends for a while. And then his friends, they were kind of gothy, emo people for about a month and a half, 2 months. And then eventually it was too much. And my uncle, he put me up in Exeter. And I stayed there for a long time. I think it was about till I was 21, but I made the same mistakes. I kept on smoking weed, I kept on failing. I didn't finish my photography career, so I didn't get any grades, I didn't get any qualifications to take out into the world of me, so I was just basically a layabout, living on the dole. And funnily enough, that's where I'm at now. I'm still living off the dole, because I got diagnosed with cancer, and I don't really have the ability to work hard, do 9-to-5 jobs, dead-end jobs, suffer and gruel just to earn a pittance of money. So I'm living on government money, tax money, and even then, now I'm in the crap. I owe lots of money to the government because they overpaid me because my wife had to work to try and make ends meet because benefit system is so flawed, it doesn't actually financially support anyone. They try and keep you down on a certain level, eating certain foods, being submissive to the system. And I guess my grief is continuing. My past trauma is still playing catch up. But I don't know this for a fact. I've let go of a lot of it, and I've forgiven myself for a lot of it, and I've been forgiven for a lot of it. Because, when you're told you're going to die, you have to kind of face it. The guilt, the pain, the suffering. You have to go, what do I need to change? Why did this happen? And the new German science, or whatever it's called, there's a new thing out that basically suggests that trauma is the only reason we get illness. And I had so much, when I was young, there was a circumstance where I was playing a game. It was like, get up the hill, get up this concrete wall really fast. And one of my friends pulled my leg out and I rolled backwards off this, it's like a brick, that stone wall, kind of a slanted 45 degree angle stone wall. I did a roly-poly backwards off this wall one because it was on top of a wall and then a slant going up towards a fence. He pulled my leg, I rolled backwards, and I fell straight on the point of my head where I have this cancer now. I banged it really hard, and I didn't go to the doctors to check it out. I just kind of shook it off. I was young, I was like, well, yeah, whatever. And there was a situation when I was doing drugs a lot, doing MDMA, experimenting with mushrooms with friends, going to raves, where I turned my head once and there was a crunch. I didn't realise until recently that could have been part of cancer occurring in my body, in the brain, causing problems. But I didn't realise what it was. I thought it was just excessive abuse of the body. Which it could have been. It could have been the trigger, but I won't know. Maybe the cannabis was withholding it, holding it back. I will never know. I can't, there's no way to look at the body's trauma and understand where illness came from that I know of. But I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I'm going to say that it kind of all came to a head when I was about 20, 21, where I'd almost severed all ties with my family through my abuse of myself and my lies and my inability to not play the victim. I was playing the victim for so long, from like the age of 12, probably from the age of 7, when I witnessed something that really scarred me, which I won't go into detail about now because it's quite personal. But basically, yeah, so I was holding on to this trauma and this guilt and this fear mind, this purely fear-minded person, Pablo, living with my uncle, and I ended up fucking up with him around as well. I mean, he was looking after me, he treated me nice, he let me look after myself, he didn't force me to do anything, he let me make my own mistakes, which I did. But eventually, the landlady, his landlady, kicked me out because I didn't pay the rent. It was as simple as that. I was too busy getting high, going to parties, getting wasted, that I couldn't pay the rent. And I ended up getting kicked out. So I ended up getting to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm so messed up. I just keep doing the same thing, repeating the same mistakes over and over. What can I do? What can I do? Where can I go? And I ended up, my grandmother pointed me towards a friend of the family who was a kind of spiritual counsellor. And I talked through a lot of my problems, and I thought I was addicted to cannabis. I was like, I need to stop. I really need to stop, but I can't quit. I'm addicted. And I went to a drugs project in Exeter, the city, and I spoke to an ex-heroin addict, and I said, I'm addicted to cannabis. How can I quit? And he laughed in my face. You know, it's such a shock to hear someone who was so addicted to a very addictive drug tell me that you can't be addicted to cannabis. It's not an addictive drug. I was addicted to the dopamine, the high, the habit. That it was so easy to quit. When he laughed at me, it triggered something in me that went, it is laughable that I keep doing this, that I keep making this mistake, that I keep clinging on to it. So I really worked, and I spoke to this friend of the family, counsellor, and we got to the bottom of my kind of trauma of the time, why I had not let go, why I could not let go, and I worked through it, and I found that there was a lot about myself that I can love, because who I am deep down inside is so innocent, so unique, and I've always known me to be there. The I, the one behind the I, the ego, the one watching, that's truly me. And I've always noticed that, because I'm going to take you back to when I was a kid, when the first trauma happened, when I arrived in this new home, because I was born in a little town not far from where I am now, in Harpton Fort, and we moved to Buckfordsley, and I didn't know that it was changing until I arrived there and went, what's this? Why is this happening? That trauma. So I realised that the innocent person before that trauma, the Pablo who realised that he didn't want to leave his home, his town of birth, that suffering, the ego identity I attached to from that very early age of 2 to 3 years old, the little innocent boy before then was always me, the one that was always watching the trauma and going, this isn't you. You don't have to connect to this. You don't have to attach to this story. But because obviously when you're young, you have no concept of the ego, the identity. You are just an innocent. Until that cord snaps. But I realised when I was doing this work upon myself, on my heart and my mind, that there was so much to love. There was so much innocence that I could reconnect with, that I didn't need to grieve anymore. And I don't know if it sounds pathetic or not, but just talking it through makes me feel less burdened. Again, every time I talk it through with someone, like my wife or my grandmother or my mum, this trauma, this pain, I can let go more of it. And fortunately, cancer has given me kind of a space to change again. So 9 years I've been on this path of trying to remain present, of knowing that behind my eyes, behind my mind, behind my ego, there is the innocence of life that I can be aware of and allow to be in this moment, in the present moment. The power of now, essentially, is where I am. That's innocence. That's the innocence of life. I could be a playful human being. I don't have to be this egocentric human like most adults, where I'm stuck in the desire for more, the desire for what's the word? An unattainable goal of material. So I guess this will be the first installment in my little podcast series. I thought I'd let you know a little bit about where my grief and my trauma and my pain came from. It came from an early age. All that I can remember is that it came from that very first instance of pain, of unknowing, the first instance of fear, I guess, that triggered a response in me that went, I don't like this. I don't like strange things. I don't like to feel like this, negative. And yet here I am, trying to understand it and trying to help others understand that being told you're going to die is not the end. It's just the beginning of something special, something amazing, something so universally wonderful and light-bringing, that I just want to say to everybody who's going through some trauma, it doesn't matter how infinitesimal it seems, trauma is trauma, right? And it harms us if we allow it. For example, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I'm going to tell you about the trauma I felt, but it wasn't trauma for myself, it was trauma for my wife and my mother, who were sat with me in the surgeon's waiting office when he said, I'm sorry to say this, Pablo, and I cut him short and I said, it's GBM, isn't it? It's glioblastoma multiforme. He said, yes, I'm sorry, but it's the highest grade of brain tumour and the outlook isn't good. You have a 4 centimetre mass in your brain and it's causing this problem for you and you may die. And I knew this because I'd researched it and I'd already prepared myself for it. So I kind of had this very, very eerily similar experience of that first moment in Buckfordsley when I went to a strange place. There was a kind of space, I was spaced out essentially, my focus got wider, so my vision was able to encompass everybody in the room, everybody's energy, everybody's auras. And I looked over at my wife and my mum. My mum was white, my wife was shocked and pale. I saw true pain and suffering on behalf of me. And I was able to let go of my own pain and suffering and trauma by witnessing it in others that cared more about me than themselves in that moment. And I was able to do the same for them. I was like, I care so much about these people that I don't want to leave. I'm not ready to leave. So I need to maintain this life. I need to reconnect to this love, this unequivocal and immortal and innocent love that we all have for one another that we just don't acknowledge. And I was able to change the way I felt and thought. I turned death, the idea of death, into something positive. My will to live. And I found it. And I found my courage and my bravery and my persistence, my will. So I'm here. I'm still here. I'm going to do the work and I'm going to work really hard to survive. Because that's what I need to do. I hope you join me on this journey of discovery, self-discovery for yourself, discovery of another's trauma, understanding of pain, and how you can change it to something so strong and positive.